Lions running backs Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery are primed to both finish as top 10 scorers this week in a huge matchup against the Buffalo Bills. We dig into our Week 15 running back and quarterback rankings on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. We're here for you every day, Monday through Friday, helping you win your fantasy football championships. I am one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Enjoy the NFL season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win that first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, it's time to start our positional rankings for Week 15. We start today with running backs and quarterbacks, and then we'll get into wide receivers and tight ends on tomorrow's show. So let's start right at the top here because you have an interesting running back one. I mean, this guy's fantastic, but it's Jahmyr Gibbs, who's had a couple, weeks that it's not up to par for what we're used to with Gibbs and back-to-back weeks here. But you have him number one against the Bills, and you also have David Montgomery as your running back 9. I'm high on both of these guys too. I have Gibbs at 8. I have Montgomery at 13. But tell me why you have Gibbs number 1 this week.
Yeah, I think this is the ideal matchup for Jahmyr Gibbs. The Lions are really good at getting him open in the short passing game. That's a big part of what he does. And that's how you have to attack the Bills. We've seen it all season long. We've seen running games have success. Kind of the Rams open things up offensively as well for the downfield passing with how well they were able to run. So if you can run on the Bills, it kind of facilitates everything. They need to run because that's how Jared Goff can get going as well against the Bills. It's at home. Jahmyr Gibbs tends to explode at home. This is a very good chance for multiple touchdowns for him in particular. Maybe one on the ground, one in the air. And David Montgomery, look, they're just a strong tag team. They seem to almost to get equal work, and it kind of goes in reverse, right? One guy starts the power and goes and gets the receiving yards later, and it's vice versa for the second back. So this committee has not really been a committee. It's just two guys that keep smashing at a really high level here. So I like it. That's how you beat the Bills. It's at home also. That really helps where they're really good overall, Lions offensively. So I think there are a lot of points to be had, and there's a good chance these guys are going to do much of the scoring as they usually do.
Yeah, and the Bills are giving up the third most points per game to running backs. They're giving up a ton of receptions to running backs. That could be huge for Gibbs. And then for Montgomery, he's just he's a great running back too to have because that's pretty much where he finishes in most weeks, right? But he has that running back 1 upside. The last 5 weeks he's finished as the running back 16, 4, running back 4, running back 10, 15, and 10. He's just a consistent scorer. So you got to love David Montgomery for that, with Gibbs having the huge upside in any given week. We have a lot of the same guys at the top here. Derrick Henry is my running back 1. He's your running back 2. Saquon Barkley, your 3, my 4. Chase Brown is my running back 3. Your running back 5. Bijan, we both have high as well. Joe Mixon, of course, is 2. Now, Josh Jacobs, we both have ranked high because he should be there. You have him at 4. I have him at 7. The thing with him is he's been such an insane touchdown scorer, right? I mean, it's been multiple touchdowns most weeks, 3 touchdowns in 2 of the last 3 games, has finished as the running back 5, 2, 6, and 3 over the last 4 weeks. But can that touchdown production continue? Because it's been insane.
Yeah, the Seahawks are not like the stoutest run defense, and actually their pass defense has gotten better as Mike McDonald has used his players, schemed them up a little bit better. So I think if the Packers are going to win this game, they got to ride Josh Jacobs quite a bit to control the action. And if they get into a situation where Jordan Love has to drop back off, and I don't think it's great, as again, some of those Ravens concepts are starting to seep into Seattle's mindset here, the former Ravens concepts. And now you can see maybe why the Ravens were struggling without him, Denard Wilson and Zach Orr, where these guys were scheming a lot of things in the right direction. So the Seahawks defense, again, is tricky for Jordan Love. I don't love Love this week. Jacobs has to be the guy. And again, the touchdowns are there because that's part of their commitment to him, that they want to use him in the red zone and score. They don't really have that close score, right? They have some big play guys at receiver. Tucker Kraft is basically it, right? If they're looking for short area scoring other than Jacobs. So that's also what helps him. I think he has a fine game this week. Easy RB1.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to be starting him, and as long as the touchdowns keep coming, because it's not like he's putting up a ton on the ground, but also he's does absolutely nothing through the air, or he has a huge game in the air. So that's kind of inconsistent. But yeah, this should be a good game for him. What about the running back on the other side, Zach Charbonnet? I am ranked as my running back 9 this week. And that's obviously assuming Kenneth Walker won't be good to go. If he plays, then I have to change that up. But you have him at running back 15. He's just, when he starts, he's great. He gets a ton of volume. The last 2 games he started, he scored 24 points, and then this last week 38 points. So he's a great start if Kenneth Walker's not there, no matter who he's playing. And the Packers are middle of the pack, nothing to be afraid of.
Yeah, and even if he drops off from what he's done as a starter and just is kind of consistent and just gets the touches and gets like 80 combined yards and score, he's still going to be very effective for you as an RB2. So he was an RB1 with his performance last week. Again, it seems like they don't trust anyone else in this backfield other than these 2 guys. So when Walker's down, Charbonnet really has a big disparity over anyone else, including Kenny McIntosh on their roster. So they liked him. Again, they drafted him high for a reason. I've liked him as a versatile back. We've talked about it, and we've seen the talent manifest itself. And again, I think that's how the Seahawks are going to have to try to win this game as well. You don't want to throw on the Packers too much either.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, another guy we're similar on, Achane. I'm 6, you have him 7. It's not like his production on the ground is insane, but he's getting the receptions. He gets the scoring opportunities. You are going to be happy starting him. Now, you have 2 guys in the same game that are in your top 12 that aren't always typically top 12 guys, right? You have Rico Dowdle as your wide receiver 8 for the Cowboys, and then Chuba Hubbard, your running back. I think I said wide receiver before, obviously running back, and then running back 12 for Hubbard here in that same game between the Panthers and the Cowboys. I also have them high. I have Rico Dowdle at running back 12. I have I have Hubbard at 16. I mean, both of them have a great matchup, and both of them get insane workload, right? Like the way the Cowboys are all of a sudden using Dowdle, if he could start scoring, I completely understand your running back 8. I am at 12 just because of the touchdown worries.
Yeah, I mean, he had been scoring, keep in mind, as a receiver before the game. So that was kind of the thing that they didn't quite have. And the Cowboys were struggling a little bit to finish some drives there in that game. I mean, they've had Brandon Cooks has basically pilfered a couple of those really short touchdowns that could be easily running back touchdowns. So let's hope that Dowdle can get those. But yeah, I mean, I don't see any situation. I mean, it was a great matchup against the Bengals. The Cowboys have found something in the running game. He produced big time yardage on the ground. And Chuba Hubbard, again, no Jonathan Brooks, unfortunately for him, another torn ACL. So he's leading his backfield again. So a lot of carries. That's how both of these teams are going to try to win games. They're actually both desperately alive in the playoff picture. Cowboys trying to get a wild card. Panthers trying to somehow win the very weak NFC South. So they'll be actually a little bit motivated to run and try to win the game, because this could be it for either team this game. Whatever happens, that's it probably for the loser of this one. So they're going to really try to win on both sides.
I actually had no idea the Panthers were still alive to make the playoffs. So that
All
is,
because their division stinks. That's why.
that is insane. All right, we're going to keep going on with our running back rankings here. I mean, we have to make some tough decisions on Jonathan Taylor, on James Cook, right? James Cook disappointed a ton last week. Jonathan Taylor has not been what we're used to. But are we going to trust these guys in the first week of many people's fantasy playoffs? We'll get into that in the rest of our running back rankings right after a quick break. Listen up, renters. Ever feel like you're stuck in this loop of rent payments, just watching your money vanish into thin air? It's time to turn that rent game around and start earning some serious rewards. That's where Built Rewards comes in. Built is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent every month, Just pay your rent and watch the Built points roll in. Use points to jet off on dream vacation. Put your points toward a flight or a hotel stay with 500 plus airlines and 700,000 plus hotels and properties to choose from. You can also use your points to book fitness studio classes. You can redeem them towards a future rent payment. They're honestly just designed to meet your lifestyle. Pay rent hassle-free through the Built Rewards app, and your rent game just got a major upgrade. Earn points by paying rent right now when you go to joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNFL. That's joinbilt.com/LockedOnNFL. Make sure to use our URL, please, so they know we sent you. Again, that's joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNFL to start earning points with your rent payments today. So I have to make this decision, Vinny. Like I have Jonathan Taylor in one league, and he has been highly inconsistent. I mean, before the bye, luckily he did have a decent fantasy outing, but he needed 25 carries to get to 96 rushing yards, and he didn't have a rushing touchdown in that game. He happened to come down with a receiving touchdown. It's been a while since we've seen him get a rushing touchdown. Anthony Richardson is stealing a lot of those from him. Are you trusting him this week against the Broncos? For some reason, I am. I have him as running back 11, a little bit higher than you. You have him at running back 17.
I think in general, I think you've pretty much mentioned that you like the Colts a little bit more maybe than a lot of people would this week. I also like them for this fact. I mean, you have to factor this in. This is basically the Colts season. If they can beat the Broncos, the team right in front of them, the number 7 for the last wild card spot, then the Colts, it gets interesting, right? Can they make a run to close it? Their schedule's not all that difficult going forward. They have to close with the other part of their AFC South schedule. That's the favorable part. So when you look at that, I mean, they could go into Denver and win. They're coming off a bye. The Broncos are also coming off a bye. So it'll be interesting to see who adjusts better there for the weaknesses and the matchups of its game plan. But when you look at Taylor, he has to be a big factor because you can't really throw like nuts on the Broncos unless you're just Jameis Winston. You don't care about the result and you get picked. But they also didn't win the game. The Colts are trying to win the game, so they don't want to put Anthony Richardson in too much harm's way. You'd think Shane Steichen's made some adjustments, have these guys both healthy together. It's been a while, right? You haven't had Richardson and Taylor fully healthy together on the field until this game. So that could also come into factor how they run Richardson to get Taylor going. So I do like Taylor. I do need him to come through badly in multiple leagues this week. So I'm counting on him. Again, I want to be cautiously optimistic that he's an RB2 with some RB1 upside this week.
Yeah, I'll be choosing between him and Ramondre Stevenson. It's going to be a very hard choice that I feel like I'm going to go back and forth on all week. Now, you have James Cook pretty low for James Cook, right? He's running back 22 for you. I am at running back 14. Now, I understand last week it was a colossal fail. If you needed him to win your playoffs, to make it into the, or to win your fantasy game, to make it into the playoffs, he probably really, really screwed you over, right? He only scored 3.9 points last week. But prior to that, the 3 weeks prior, he's running back 10, running back 9, running back 8. We know he has the upside. We know Josh Allen can really hurt him in any given week because he could steal all the touchdowns. But I still am willing to bet that James Cook finishes as a top 15 guy this week.
Yeah, I think I put him that low. Maybe I'm overreacting to that disaster from last week. Maybe I'm overreacting to the fact that he's getting the Lions. It's one of the toughest matchups for any running back. I mean, he's going to have to make his hay this week through catching passes, and he wasn't involved doing that for Josh Allen last week. Pretty much everyone else was, and scoring. So if he can catch enough passes and score, then he's going to be closer to where Michelle would like him. I'm not necessarily counting on that for sure in this game. The Bills could just come up throwing and just say, we're not going to try to mess with the Lions' run defense. So there's all kinds of factors. Then the other wild card in all this is how many receivers do they have healthy? Last week, it was a lot of Amari Cooper and Khalil Shakir, but is there a chance that Keon Coleman and Dalton Kincaid return for this one? And then the targets are kind of spread out, right, in the passing game. And if Cook can't get that touchdown or the rushing yards, then his upside is limited. But again, 22. If you have him at 14, Michelle, a little bit higher, you have him a high-end RB2, I have him a low-end RB2, whatever you look at it, you have to basically start him because he's a volume-based guy this week.
Yeah, I mean, he did only get 6 carries last week. That can't happen,
Yeah, that
right?
volume won't happen again. Like,
Yeah.
you'd think they would overcorrect that at least where he gets 12 to 15. I'm hoping more touches than that.
Yeah, and if they get around the goal line, I guess it comes down to either they let Josh Allen run it in or James Cook,
Yeah.
but hopefully he can steal at least a touchdown there. Now, Tony Pollard, he is inconsistent, right?
Mhm.
He's had some big games, but the last 5 weeks it's been 8 points, 3.9, 20 points, 6, and then 13 last week with 100 yards, but no touchdowns. We both have him ranked pretty high this week against the Bengals. I'm running back 15. You have him at running back 11. Tony Pollard's biggest issue, right? It's not, I mean, he's getting a lot of carries most weeks. He's getting production. He's a good running back this year. He's not scoring touchdowns. He has 1 touchdown scored since week 7. But the Bengals defense, they let anybody score touchdowns.
Yeah, and last week the Bengals broke down again. I mean, they were getting improved against the run. I don't know how much Dowdle could break through, but essentially, if they face a decent rushing attack, that's what's going to happen here with the Bengals. And Tony Pollard, again, there's a little bit of knowledge here. I don't know how much it's going to factor with Brian Callahan being the coach. Is he going to know some things that Lou Anarumo does with the defense where you can get Tony Pollard going in the running game? But Pollard, again, he came from the Cowboys where Dowdle was kind of behind him. So maybe there's some tips there that they can get going with, but you think he should have a very good game. I mean, he should stay in it here for sure. I don't think necessarily the Bengals are going to run away. They haven't really run away from anyone. And if they do that a little bit, that's my only concern. But again, I think the Titans keep it close because of the Callahan factor, and Pollard can do some damage there. So I think he has a decent game. I just wish he would catch passes a little bit more and do that, like when they're behind, where I could really feel good about him. But it should be better, right? I mean, Tyjae Spears is hardly playing. He's been hurt in and out, and when he's available, you really use him. So it should be a lot better than it is, and hopefully it is this week.
Yeah, I do think he should be a really good play. It's going to come down to that touchdown or not, which he hasn't been getting, but it's kind of similar to Rico Dowdle, right? He's getting the volume. He's looking good. He's took over Pollard's role from last year. And again, Rico Dowdle's not scoring just like Pollard didn't score last year. So kind of frustrating for them. If they just get into the end zone, it's going to be big weeks. Now, these 3 guys, I'm having a hard time ranking because either the matchup or just the inconsistency with usage. But rank these 3 for me: Rachaad White against the Chargers, Ramondre Stevenson against the Cardinals, and Najee Harris against the Eagles. I think a lot of people are going to want to play Rachaad White if Bucky Irving misses the game. My biggest concern with him, I'll say, is that, the Chargers are a really good defense, and they've only allowed 4 scrimmage touchdowns to running backs this entire season.
Yeah.
And then will they utilize Sean Tucker more if Bucky Irving is completely out of the game? Yeah. So those are my 2 concerns with White. And then with Najee, you get a hard matchup against the Eagles, and he's very touchdown or bust. It might be Stevenson who is the safest here with the most upside.
Yeah, we also figure I don't think the Cardinals are capable of just dominating the Patriots. I don't think they've been playing that well to do that, and it doesn't say that. The game and the spread doesn't say that. So they should stay in the game. The Cardinals were atrocious last week against the run against Zach Charbonnet. So they've been actually not good against the run for most of the season. So that gives you some hope with Stevenson. Also the game script. And again, we talked about you need to be in positions where that team is not going to fall behind too much and they can easily pivot to Gibson or wherever dumping off passes to Demario Douglas. You want to avoid that situation. But I think the Patriots will stand a game. They're coming off a bye, so they'll be rested there. So they'll get Stevenson going, I think. So I think Stevenson is the easiest to trust for the combination of getting enough touches and the matchup. I think you look at Najee Harris. I think the Eagles leaked a little bit against the run against the Panthers last week. So I still think he can be a valuable tool, and I like him ahead of White. And again, I'm just afraid of that Chargers run defense like they did with Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco could basically render that backfield a non-factor and make Baker Mayfield throw a lot against Justin Herbert.
I want to ask about Tyrone Tracy.
It's a tough one.
This is a very tough one because he's getting a lot of targets. Last week he got 10 targets.
Yeah.
It did only turn into 5 receptions, 38 yards. But now he's going to have a different quarterback again from last week. It's not going to be Drew Lock. They're going back to Tommy DeVito. But the last 2 weeks, 13.5 and 16.8 fantasy points scored in half PPR. Like, that's a very viable running back to flex play. But he gets the Ravens, who are the second best run defense in the league. But they do give up receptions to running backs. And we know Tracy can be that receiving back. Are you going to trust him? Is he a viable play? Or would you go with one of the Jets running backs instead, and Isaiah Davis or Braylon Allen against the Jaguars?
I still go Tracy because the history's there. I mean, Devin Singletary is hardly seeing the field. If he comes in, it's annoying. He sometimes will pilfer a touchdown or vulture one in the red zone. But when I look at this, I mean, Tyron Tracy, they know he's a special weapon at this point. It's hard to get anything going downfield with the league neighbors. They lost Theo Johnson, their rookie tight end. It's basically throwing shorter to Wan'Dale Robinson and him, right? When they do that, and Tracy, again, that converted wide receiver stuff is in play. So I like Tracy. He's just been sneakily solid, right, as an RB2. Like, he didn't seem like he was going to be a big factor. He fought through the fumbles, stayed on the field for still some key touches here. He kind of displaced Singletary once both were healthy. So Tracy, again, is going to finish strong. I think he is a guy that is the best bet to score also on the Giants. We know that. So I think you feel a lot better about Tracy because there's multiple paths for him to get the right amount of touches to give us fantasy production.
I actually kind of really like Braylon Allen this week. I think people are going to change over to Isaiah Davis just because he got that touchdown. But we didn't get to see any, what happens if they get near the goal line. I do still think it would be Braylon Allen. They both 50-50 split, but I do think Allen has the better game this week. So I'd slightly lean Allen, but I think Tracy, as long as he can get the targets and receptions, possibly, I just can't see them ever in scoring position against the Ravens, but who knows? We're going to transition over to our quarterback rankings. We got some tough decisions here, and you have another Lions guy at the top. Like, you're loving up on these Lions players. Jared Goff is ranked very high in your rankings. We'll get to him and the rest of our quarterback rankings right after a quick break. Hey, Locked On fans, if you're anything like me, your holiday shopping list is still far, far from complete. Well, if that's the case, I've got the perfect gift for any passionate sports fan in your life. Perhaps you've heard of Ice Shaker. Ice Shaker is now officially licensed with the NFL, NHL, NBA, NCAA, and MLB, and will make the ideal gift. It's been created by and used by the Gronkowski brothers. Ice Shakers have sold over 1 million bottles. They have changed the game with workout bottles, and it's a gift you've been looking for. Go to iceshaker.com and use the code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout to save 25% off your order. I have one. It's fantastic. It's a kitchen grade stainless steel bottle. It holds ice up to 30 hours or longer. Like, I have 2 of them, so I keep this one at my desk for work, and I came in today and it's still full of ice. Absolutely amazing. But also, my favorite part is that it has this patented twist agitator, and it just, it's already, if you're not watching on YouTube, it's just connected to the top, so that, like, when you're making your protein drink after a workout, you're not looking for those stupid little balls everywhere when you're trying to make your protein drink, so it doesn't have the big clumps of powder. Never have that issue with these bottles. It also makes some awesome cocktails as well. It's pretty cool. And if you like any of the logos, you can go with that, or you can do your own customizable logo as well on their site. So order your team branded bottles today at iceshaker.com and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for 25% off your order. Ice Shakers, show your support for your teams with the best branded workout bottles on the market. iceshakers.com. Alrighty, let's jump into our quarterback rankings. We have the same top 5 quarterbacks, a little bit of different order. I have Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts as my top 5 in that order. And your order goes Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, and Joe Burrow. So I guess we are, same top 5. I was correct. Now it gets a little bit different once we get into our quarterback 6. You have Jared Goff at quarterback 6. I have Brock Purdy, and I have Goff at 13. Well, you have Purdy at 10. So kind of flip-flopped on those guys. So, Vinny, why do you like both the running backs and Jared Goff in this matchup?
Well, I think things are going to go nuts in this one. I mean, I could see this just being a high-scoring affair. I mean, Lions have gotten to that with the Packers. I mean, really, both teams came off really high-scoring games from last week. And again, I've said this before, like, when the running game works, that's when Jared Goff is a better play. When the running game could be a little contained, that's when he's hard. I mean, it just comes down, to the touchdowns. But the good thing about the Lions is they score enough that things can go around, and then Montgomery and Gibbs can also catch touchdowns as well. But I look at Jared Goff again. I've talked about this, the quarterback resistance thing, where you need basically one guy to go off so the other guy goes off because they have to go back and forth. The total is extremely high in this game. You expect both teams to score points, go back and forth. So again, if Allen's going to put it up and put up some numbers here, Goff will too. And that's why I like him up there. And really, that's why I kind of look at these things a little bit differently, where I'm looking at, okay, is this game going to be high scoring? Are both quarterbacks going to need to throw a lot? And that perfect storm of events with the Lions Bills is great for fantasy this week.
And I understand it, right? It should be a high scoring game. I could see a way that Jared Goff has a fantastic game, right? Or I can also see the running back stealing all the touchdowns. Also, Goff struggles against zone coverage, and the Bills play a very, very high percentage of zone coverage. But Goff against zone coverage this year, 9 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. All 10 of his interceptions thrown have been against zone coverage. Well, he's 16 touchdowns to 0 interceptions against man. So that's just all I'm worried about in this matchup, those two things. But I still think he's a viable play. Now, I have Brock Purdy as quarterback 6, as I said, against the Rams. They play on Thursday night. Listen, the second half of the season, he's been quarterback 6, 8, 5, 5. And then the game he got his injured shoulder, quarterback 13. Then he missed a game, came back from that injured shoulder, played in the blizzard, was terrible. But then last week goes back home, quarterback 7. So it's like anytime he's not injured or playing in a blizzard, he's a top 6, 5, 7 guy, right? So that's why I have him there at 6. The Rams have allowed the 9th most points per game to quarterbacks this year, and Purdy's already played the Rams earlier this year, put up 26 fantasy points in that game, nearly 300 passing yards. He had 3 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. So I think Brock Purdy's a good play again this week.
Yeah, I like Brock Purdy. I have him at 10, only because I like some other guys as well. I mean, like Tua, I think he's going to have to throw a lot.
I like Tua too.
Yeah, and then you have Sam Darnold, who's too hot to sit right now, and then Justin Herbert and Baker Mayfield around, but I actually like Herbert a little bit more than Purdy, and Mayfield a little bit down. But I think this could be essentially a very high-scoring week for quarterbacks. So Purdy could have nice numbers and still finish down here. I think you're going to have a lot of big point totals. We had a hint of some high-scoring games last week. I think it could get bigger this week. A lot of defenses are having attrition and injuries that are breaking them down. So and the Rams' problem is their youth on defense. And again, Purdy's going to have to throw probably a little bit more in this game. I just don't see him having a huge ceiling because I'm not expecting the Rams to necessarily light it up. I think they're going to be kind of worn down from last week, and they're up and down, right? Just when you think you're going to buy the Rams as a complete offense, they'll go turn around and not have the same type of game. So, again, I like Purdy, but I think there could be a lot of spectacular scoring like we had last week at quarterback.
Yeah, and I'm like the 3 names you just mentioned, Herbert, Darnold, and Tua, I have them 7 through 9, right? Yeah. So I'm right with you there. We have a very similar rankings this week throughout our top 10. The real only difference is Kyler Murray. I have him at 10, you have him at 17. I understand he's very inconsistent, but even last week, it felt like a terrible week. He still put up 20 fantasy points. Like, it's hard to not have him top 10 now, but let's discuss Justin Herbert, right? Because yeah, Darnold's been too hot to sit. Like, you're going to play him. Tua is definitely a viable play and a good matchup, but Justin Herbert has the best matchup you can have against the Buccaneers for fantasy quarterbacks this week. But Herbert's been really bad for fantasy over the last 2 weeks, right? He has 1 passing touchdown, hasn't been throwing a ton, doesn't have a lot of passing yards, and now he's dealing with the hurt thigh, right? I think that's where it was, the contusion. If he does play, clearly we're trusting him. We have him ranked high, but are we trusting him too much?
I don't know if we're trusting him too much. I think you're going to look at the Buccaneers on the other side. They're going to probably throw quite a bit in this one. As we mentioned, not a great running back matchup for them if Bucky Irving's out. So you figure both teams are going to put the ball in the air, and he's going to have to, again, with the J.K. Dobbins injury. They weren't all that effective. I know Gus Edwards had the touchdown last week, but they were not an effective running team. Without Dobbins, it was also a very tough matchup against the Chiefs. This one is semi-tough, right? The Bucs used to be unplayable for running backs, but now they've been a lot softer up front. But you're definitely looking at receiving core now. I'm not sure about Ladd McConkey, but there's still plenty of guys that can exploit what the Bucs do. Will Dissly has a good matchup. You have really across the board, slot, outside, tight end. All these guys can produce, and Mayfield is going to have to throw quite a bit as well. So I do like Herbert this week. Again, it's hard. Like guys like Herbert, Kirk Cousins, the paper says that they should be playing and producing, but sometimes it doesn't happen. I think it does happen over this week for Herbert.
It's going to be hard to trust the guy on the other side, Baker Mayfield,
Yeah.
right?
So
Tougher matchup for him, and it's been up and down. I mean, after a killer first start of the year, he's had some other good, like he was the quarterback 5 last week, right?
Yeah.
But it's been up and down with him, and this is a harder matchup, and we both have him ranked as our quarterback 14 this week. I think he can be played. There's just a lot of other better options this week.
Yeah, this is a week where if you drafted Mayfield and you've been playing him behind some guy, don't think about it behind that other guy. It's the playoffs. I think you need to make a better decision here. Like 2 QB leagues, yeah, no brainer, all that stuff. Super flex, he's in. But any one single QB league, it's going to be a stretch unless you're in a deeper league to play Mayfield this week.
Now let's talk about 2 guys that were drafted early that you definitely were drafted by everyone, right? Like in your league, they were definitely drafted, and that's Jordan Love and CJ Stroud, right? Maybe not by you, which would be a good thing for you. But can you trust them in your fantasy playoffs if you still have them rostered? And then, or like Anthony Richardson, I'd say I would trust him. He was also drafted very high this year in all leagues. I think I would trust Anthony Richardson against the Broncos over Jordan Love and CJ Stroud this week. But if you had to rank those guys, how would you do it?
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually have Love ahead of Richardson and then Stroud after both of them. So that's how I think I would look at it. And Jordan Love also has some potential. We know as that also could be a higher scoring game, right, in Seattle. But my concern is the touchdowns are not there. And the biggest thing that's different, Michelle, from last year is he's not scoring rushing touchdowns. So that part of his game like really padded his numbers from last year. So got to keep that in mind. We saw that from Trevor Lawrence a couple of years ago, and we went all in. But those points are kind of fickle, and you can't always trust that to happen here. Really, Jordan Love is more of a pocket passer. He's also had a lot of reshuffling with who exactly his top receiver is in any given game. So that's kind of annoying, right? I think they need to have a true go-to guy where Richardson, the arrow might point up. We'll see about Josh Downs. If he can return, that gives Richardson some help on top of his running. With Stroud, again, the Dolphins' pass defense is good. The Jets kind of infiltrated it last week, but I don't love this matchup at all for Stroud. I think he's just not a guy that's going to make a lot of plays in this one because, again, Dolphins secondary is still playing well. So, again, if you look by the defenses, I think Richardson, because of his running, has the better chance in a tougher matchup.
Now, I really like Anthony Richardson this week at quarterback 11. I've been bringing him up as a good sleeper. Your sleeper of the week that you really like is Kirk Cousins. So you're saying like you would rather play Kirk Cousins over a guy like Jordan Love or CJ Stroud or the Baker Mayfields this week.
Yeah, I like to live on the edge a little bit because I also like Javonte Williams I would roll the dice. I'd roll the dice on him based on the matchup. And that's the same thing I would do with Kirk Cousins. Like the matchup is really good. I know he's gone 4 straight weeks with 0 touchdown, 4 straight games. It cannot happen again. Like the law of average says he's not that bad of a quarterback. He's been putting up 300 yards, right? It's hard not to have touchdowns when you're throwing for that much volume. So I think they finally come. He probably gets 302 this week as a decent thing against the Raiders. So again, you can run on the Raiders, but I think that's going to open some things up, the deep balls and all that. So Matt, just don't forget, don't look at what's happened before. Always look at what's happening forward. And we know 2 things. Kirk Cousins rips bad pass defenses. Number 2, he's a lot better than we think in prime time. And these are both of the things that are at play at this game because, again, the Falcons desperately need to win and he needs to play well.
They really, really do. It'll be interesting which quarterback can step up for their team this week in the same division between Cousins and Baker Mayfield because and it has to be one of those 2 teams, right? The Panthers and Saints cannot be making this comeback to win the division. That would be crazy. That is it for today's show. We will get to our wide receiver and tight end rankings on tomorrow's show. Please hit that subscribe button on YouTube if you're watching there. If you're listening on a podcast app, give us the subscription there or give us a like. And we will talk to you tomorrow. Have a great night, everybody. Bye, y'all.